Hi, hello. Today I'd love to chat to you all about some cosy sock knitting patterns perfect for fall and winter. This year I've honestly fallen in love with sock knitting, and since the cold weather started, I've really started appreciating all of the socks I've made this year. Since socks are a super portable project, I often take them on train journeys with me and any kind of commuting that I do. As a nice distraction, I really like my socks to be fancy and textured and lace and cables and everything at once, and that's what all of the patterns I'm going to talk to you about today are going to be. I think most of these socks that I've got, or all of them, are pretty much written for Magic Loop, but I think that's quite easy to change into DPNs. Magic Loop is pretty much all that I use. I think it's not too hard with socks to kind of change between the techniques. The first pattern I wanted to talk to you about is the Autumn Savory Socks by Orb Limpida. I'm sorry for the pronunciations. All of the patterns will be down below so you can have a look at the designers and not deal with my pronunciation. These are really beautiful toe-up socks with a dip stitch pattern, and they kind of look like little flowers or leaves, and I first saw them on Instagram when I think they just went out into testing, and I've saved them into my saved things like photos on Instagram, and I completely forgot about them, but when I was looking through all of my saved sock designs for this video, I found them again and fell in love with them, and I think they might be my next sock because I absolutely love them. They're a perfect amount of like plain but textured and fancy, and they're toe up and the edge at the top is scalloped, so it's really pretty, and I just think they would look absolutely beautiful. I think they would look really cute in like a nice greyish yarn, and just how the picture, like the pattern picture, but honestly any colour would suit it, even like slightly variegated yarn. I've got this regular yarn that's got slight variegation striping situation going on in like a greyish blue, and they would look really lovely in that, or maybe in something more muted. These are knitted on 2.5mm needles and using just normal fingering weight sock yarn, and the pattern is £3.93. So they're not super expensive, just a typical kind of sock price. The only thing that I would probably modify in this pattern is the German short row heel, which I'm not a massive fan of. I think my preferred heel is heel flap and gusset, so I would probably change that up a bit, but that's probably the only thing. I'm really excited to knit these. The next sock pattern is more lacy and kind of fancy, and this is the Benedict Socks Bridgerton Season 2 by Rachel Fletcher. She's got like a range of sock patterns inspired by the show Bridgerton, which I absolutely love as well. But this was my favourite from this collection, and it features this really beautiful frilly lace design at the front, and then at the back it's like a more of a plain ribbed situation. I think the front of the sock is inspired by the shirts that Benedict Bridgerton wears, and they're just really frilly and flouncy and just fancy, and I think these would look absolutely beautiful in like a marshmallow white kind of coloured yarn, just to kind of emulate that shirt look. But I think they would also look really pretty in a variegated yarn, or like a maybe pink or a blue. I think they would just look absolutely beautiful. These are cuffed down and also knitted on 2.5mm needles, again in a just standard sock yarn. These are £4, but you can get the sock collection for £21 as well. The Benedict socks actually feature my absolute favourite heel flap construction, well, just heel construction, because it's heel flap and gusset, just textured slip stitch, which is perfect. I think they fit me really well. It's so easy to do. It's just nice. Another pattern which I absolutely adore are the Wild Thyme socks by This Handmade Life. This Handmade Life just makes absolutely stunning sock patterns, and it was really hard to choose just one, but I didn't want to have too many by the same designer. I think some designers repeat, but I was really trying to have a wide variety. My saved folder was like 35 knit sock patterns, and I managed to get it down to like 14-15, so I hope this isn't super long. This sock is cuffed down and it features a twisted rib all over pattern with a little bit of lace at the front. There's both a chart and written instructions, which is quite useful. The kind of front of the lacy part of the sock is meant to look like wild thyme, and I think it really does. And the pattern photos in this really beautiful greenish kind of aquary, just dusty green look beautiful, and I really would want to knit them in that kind of colour just to make them look like thyme. I think probably just solid colours would look best for this, because any variegation would really take away from the pattern and would get lost in it because there's just so much going on. Another thing is that this pattern describes the heel as a strong heel, which I'm not sure what that means, but it's very different from anything I've seen before because there's no distinct heel. The twisted rib gets cut off and then it just goes into the stockinette on the bottom of the foot, but the twisted rib is also carried over the toes, so it's a really interesting look, and I'm very curious how it was done. Very curious how it's knitted up. These are done on 2.25mm needles, also in a typical sock yarn. The pattern costs £2.89, which I think is quite reasonable for a sock pattern. I think anything under £3 probably is, I'm willing to pay that easily. Anything above that is a bit, I'll still buy it, but I'd rather not. The lightness of the white cream yarn really doesn't let the texture shine because there's not enough shadows to make it come out. The green really makes it stand out, which is really beautiful. The next pattern is free, and this is Laid Edges by Kelly Macpherson. This is a top down, pretty much stockinette sock pattern with a kind of cable motif going on each side of the sock, but the cables are very tiny and dainty and they look really like almost like braids, and I think they look really beautiful and kind of melt into the stockinette of the sock. They're really not bold and out there, and I really love how they look in that greyish brown yarn. This is a DK weight pattern, and this is knitted on 3mm needles. The yarn used is West Yorkshire Spinners Fleece Blue Faced Leicester DK, and I think I will have to try that out because the pattern pictures look absolutely beautiful and the colour seems like really my kind of colour. I think you could also hold just normal sock kind of yarn double and knit them like that. I don't think that would really be an issue. I found that I don't really need to use nylon in my DK weight socks. I haven't worn through them. I only have one pair as well, so I'm not an authority on DK weight socks. I've not really found that to be an issue. I know that some people wear through them, but I have a lot of socks on a rotation, so it doesn't seem to be an issue for me, but definitely look into maybe nylon containing sock yarn if you're worried about that, or just hold two strands together, which might be easier. So this is a top down pattern, and I think it would knit up really quickly, especially that it's mostly stockinette with that really beautiful cable design. Heel construction is just a heel flap and gusset, but this time I think it's Eye of Partridge heel flap, I believe, or just a textured heel flap that looks very like honeycomb like. Yeah, I'm just super excited to make these. The next pattern is kind of inspired by the petite knit like frilly socks, which I really like the look of, but I don't like that they don't have them in my heel flap and gusset situation. They are a bit too plain for me. I really like my socks to have more going on than just plain stockinette, because I think you can just buy stockinette socks, and with like handmade socks you might want to have something more going on. And these are Rusalka sock by Agata Mackiewicz. These feature these wavy scaly patterns along the whole sock and a really beautiful frill around the cuff. They're just normal fingering sock yarn, and they are knitted on 2.25mm needles, and they cost £4.96, which is a little bit more expensive. They are also knitted toe up, so keep that in mind if you don't like toe up socks. I really like these, and I think the pattern kind of pictures don't do it justice in that colour. I think the orange doesn't really suit this pattern. I would probably go for more of like a muted blue or a grey, just to make it look more sea-like, because I think they're inspired by the sea and waves, and well, not the sea, I think Rusalka is in like lakes. think they would look really beautiful in just like a bluish situation, but definitely solid colours, because any kind of variegation would really detract from the sock, and I think it really does in the pattern pictures. Yeah, that's what I would do. These are the flowerknot socks by Laura Morat. They are just top down DK weight cabled socks, but the cables kind of turn into these flowers. The cables just go like this and there's a little flower, and they go like this and there's a little flower, and they just go along the whole leg at the front, which I think is absolutely beautiful. Again, they feature the slip stitch, just heel flap and gusset, which I love, and they look like they will knit up super quickly. I'm not sure if you would need a cable needle for these, possibly, because it looks like quite a lot of cabling. They're also knitted on 3mm, which I think is quite standard for DK weight socks, correct me if I'm wrong. And again, they cost £2.97, which is very reasonable, I think, for this fancy of a cabled sock. I think this must have taken quite a while to figure out, especially for all the different sizes. I am planning on knitting these up in West Yorkshire Spinners Colour Lab DK 100% British wool in the colour Soft Stone 1204, and I bought this specifically for these socks, and I think it is so beautiful. I'm not sure if you can see, but it's like a slightly beigey, very soft pink. I think the Soft Stone does it somewhat of a justice. I was really looking for a muted sock yarn, because this isn't actually a sock yarn. I was looking for a muted DK weight yarn, and West Yorkshire Spinners do really lovely yarn, but all of the colours seem to be very bright and just out there, and I think this is absolutely perfect, and it was exactly what I was looking for. I'm not sure if you can see, but yeah, it truly is a kind of stone pink. I think they would also look really beautiful in like a pastel purple or a pastel kind of green, especially the sun has gone perfect. I think it is in like this really eucalyptus colour, I think it is called. This is just stunning, and I think it would look really cute if it was plain. I'm not sure I'm a massive fan of the kind of different toe coloured look. I think I like plain, just same coloured socks, and these would just look absolutely stunning. Or maybe like a blue, but like a really soft blue. Another DK weight sock pattern is the Douro by Sarah Blau Design. These are top down with this really beautiful lacy cuff motif that's also not just straight, it's kind of like scalloped maybe, or kind of peacoat, but really big peacoat. There's lots of texture going on along the cuff, and then the leg is, and the foot is relatively plain with these, I think, slip stitches going along it, or maybe pearls. I think it's just pearls, but they look absolutely beautiful, and I think the dark yarns look really cute with these, maybe like a dark stone grey, or even like even this kind of colour that I have. This would look really pretty, but it might not show the lace quite so well. These again have a heel flap and gusset, but the heel flap is very interesting because it looks like it's slip stitch, but the kind of normal stitches seem to be pearls rather than knits, so it gives it a really cool texture. It's like a lot going on, but at the same time it looks really plain and beautiful. As typical, it is knitted on 3mm needles, and this pattern seems to be primarily French, but there's also an English translation, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue. The pattern also mentions that you can use a just normal fingering sock yarn with some mohair, and there's alternative included in the pattern. I'm not sure what that means. I don't think there should be too much of a difference knitting with a mohair and a fingering or just a DK. This pattern is slightly more expensive at £4.44. I think it's really beautiful and it might be worth it. It also have quite a few sizes. Next we have an honourable mention, because this is only available in their 52 Weeks of Socks Volume 2, which I do not have and I wasn't planning on purchasing, so it might be a bit difficult to knit these for me. These are called Ordinary Love by Yuri Kada. They're just a very simple stockinette top-down sock pattern. They're also DK weight and knitted on 3.5 and 4mm needles. These also feature a slip stitch heel flap and gusset, and they're just honestly very plain, very simple. The only fancy thing about these is the beautiful embroidery detail on them, and I absolutely fell in love with the way the brown kind of soft slightly pink sock looks with the really pretty pink flower on them. So I won't talk too much about these because I'm not sure if I'll be able to knit them, and if you've got the 52 weeks of sock book then you don't really need to hear about these, but I thought they were really worth a mention because I might buy this book just for those. The next pattern is by one of my favourite designers called Yuka. She's got really beautiful sock patterns, and these are ruki, and they are top down and toe up socks. They feature this really beautiful waffle texture along the front and around the sides. They've got these cables which are faux cables, so you don't need a cable needle for these. There isn't any stitch descriptions in this pattern. As with most Yuka patterns, there's only charts. I prefer that, but I would keep that in mind if you don't. And there's also a second version of this pattern which is Ruki Winter, which are DK weight socks, but I think I prefer the normal version, which are knitted on 2.25mm needles just in a normal kind of growing weight sock yarn. These also feature a textured kind of eye of partridge heel flap and gusset, just my favourite construction, going from the cables and the kind of waffle into that textured heel flap. It would look really pretty, and I think it's a really beautiful detail. Yuka just kind of includes those beautiful details in a lot of her patterns, and kind of the ribbing from the cuff going really prettily into any ribbing and waffle and cables along the sock. This is actually the most expensive pattern on this list, which is £5.39 or 1,000 Japanese yen, which is very steep for a sock pattern, but I do see how they would have taken a lot of work, especially that they're both toe up and cuff down. They're a bit steep. I still want to knit them though. And I really love how they're in this really pretty pink, but I actually think they would look a lot better in a darker yarn, probably West Yorkshire Spinners signature 4-ply in the colour Poppy. That is my plan for those. Next pattern, again by This Handmade Life, this is the second sock by this designer, is called Summer Flowers, and I absolutely love these socks. They are just ankle length, and I will definitely modify that to just have like a full length or kind of like slightly shorter than normal, which I do usually for my socks, as you can see. I just do like just above the ankle kind of length, and I think these would look really pretty in that. And they feature these beautiful lacy floral motifs along the front. These are cuff down and feature a slip stitch heel flap and gusset again. Really beautiful lace motif at the front intrigues me with these. This Handmade Life has a lot of patterns very similar to this one, but I think the lace looks very prominent in this pattern and it very much looks floral. The other floral-ish patterns don't look like flowers to me, but this one really reminds me of like petals, and I think it's really beautiful and would look absolutely amazing in a very light pink soft kind of yarn, or in a white, just marshmallowy, or even, dare I say, a very pale yellow. That would be really cute. They are knitted on 2.5mm needle in a standard fingering sock weight kind of yarn, and they cost £2.89. This is another designer repeat because they are again made by Yuka, and they are called Marie socks. They feature this beautiful cabled lattice design along the front of the sock as well as the back of the leg. These are a little bit different than most socks because the bottom of the foot is actually textured rather than just stockinette. They're just very wide ribbing along the bottom, but they feature just so many techniques. There's the beautiful cabled lattice as well as slip stitches, as well as the texture along the bottom. They are top down with a twisted rib cuff, and the heel flap is eye of partridge. They are knitted on 2.25mm needles and cost £3.88. Another twisted rib sock pattern that I absolutely fell in love with is the Pigneto socks by Laura Morat. I keep thinking it's pronounced Morcats, but it's Laura Morats. These are knitted top down and they feature this beautiful scalloped edge along the top of the sock and these fan shaped twisted rib details along the cuff and very thin stems going along the sock leg, and I think they would look really beautiful if they were knitted slightly shorter than the pattern suggests, so they just come out of kind of sneakers or like trainers. I think they would look really cute. That would probably do them a lot more justice than wearing them with like boots, because you probably wouldn't be able to see them. I really like how the top of the sock is also coloured, whereas the rest of the sock is a different colour, and I think they would look really nice if there was very little contrast between the colours, but kind of like a slightly darker grey and then a slightly lighter grey, but not too much contrast between them. These are knitted top down and again feature a slip stitch heel flap. They are knitted on 2.5mm needles and cost £3.05. I would maybe modify these to kind of contain something along the centre of the sock, because I'm not sure I like the look of socks which are just stockinette and then have two kind of like tracks going along the sides, because I think they look a bit like your foot is just a block, which obviously no one cares, but I care. I would maybe add like an extra row of the rib going along the centre of it, or maybe include some sort of pattern along the centre. I'm not sure. Maybe the positioning of the fans as well would fix it a little bit. I think there would be quite a bit of thinking involved for me knitting this pattern, but that doesn't take away from them, and they are absolutely beautiful. We are getting to the end of this pattern roundup, but these are socks that I've been meaning to knit since I've kind of begun sock knitting, but I've been really intimidated by how beautiful they are, because I feel like they need the perfect yarn and I cannot figure out what the perfect yarn is for these. But they are called Anemone, again by Yuka. These are knitted toe up and feature a short row heel, which I'm not entirely certain of. I think I would modify that to just be probably a stockinette, just heel flap and gusset, because I'm not a fan of how short row heels fit my feet, but if you like those, definitely give it a go. They feature this really beautiful lace along the centre of the front of the sock, but the feature that I love the most about them is their scalloped lace detail along the sides of the sock, which just makes them look so beautiful. I think maybe just a white would make them look beautiful, but I think then I couldn't wear them with everything, so I think I might want to find a really light lavender sock yarn for these, because I think they would look really cute in that, but it would have to be a very light, maybe almost white, kind of greyish sock yarn, and if you know about anything like that, then definitely let me know. They might actually look really pretty in that regular yarn that I mentioned, the slightly greyish blue. That one's discontinued and I only have one ball, so that will need to be for a very special sock set. They are knitted on 2.25mm needles and cost £4.85. I'm looking at the pattern pictures and one of the samples was knitted in a really dark grey yarn, and I think I would steer away from that because you can't see that really beautiful scalloped detail along them that I love, so I think I'd go for something very pale so that it would really show it off. As is typical for Yuka patterns, these are charted only, no kind of written instructions apart from obviously the knitting instructions, just not for the motifs along the sock. And the final pattern, which has been in my queue for a very long time but has always intimidated me, is Free, and they are called Thrift Bloom Socks by Lisa Schwetter. They are knitted on 2mm needles and feature this really beautiful lace detail that looks almost cabled but not entirely along the sides, omitting the centre, and the centre is just stockinette. And they also feature these really pretty and dainty cables along the sides of the sock. The heel is short row again, which I'm not a massive fan of, as you know, so I would absolutely modify that. The toe of these socks kind of doesn't look any different than the sock itself. The lace goes into the toe, so it makes it look kind of pointy, which I'm not sure how is created. It's not really mentioned how the toes are done, but they are knitted top down, so I reckon it probably is just a wedged toe. Either way, I think they would look really cute in something other than that brown. I'm throwing so much shade in this, but yeah, I think my sock yarn choices are very much not bright, not warm toned, not variegated, just kind of plain. I'm not sure what I will knit this in, probably like a really nice pale green pastel sort of colour, or a blue, or maybe even pink, just because they kind of remind me of spring, like of wheat and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think these are really cute, and they are the final pattern in this roundup. I hope this has inspired you to knit more socks, because I definitely will, and I cannot wait to cast all of these on. This is a lot of patterns and I have a very limited amount of time to knit socks. I'm hopefully fulfilling my sock knitting dreams by talking about them in this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!